everybody, I'm Cinnamon Cooney, your art Sherpa, and today I'm going to show you how to paint this extraordinary Stormy lighthouse with a very limited color palette in a short amount of time. I'm going to give you all the instruction you need to be able to follow along and complete this painting and have a lot of fun with me. So I want you to grab your paint, grab your brushes, and come back and meet me at this easel right now. Come on. I'm so glad you decided to join me for today's Stormy Lighthouse. I think Stormy Lighthouses are meaningful because not every day is a sunny day. Not every day is a perfect day. And sometimes really intense weather or circumstances in our lives happen. And paintings like this help us touch to those feelings and the idea that it's wonderful to have a light in even the darkest of nights. The first step that I want you to do is to sketch in the painting. I'll talk a little bit about that. So when I sketched in this painting, I made sure that I created a vertical line to help me from having my lighthouse tip either way. And then on either side of it, so that it was about 2 inches wide, I came down with a line that flared out, and I came down again with a line that flared out. At the top of this, I make a little bit of a curved line. It's like a small frown, and I arced out 2 support lines. This is where our person would walk. I'm giving them a little bit of a fence here for safety. Straight up and down vertical lines here for where the light is. And a nice curved line for the top of the lighthouse. The wave is a little below the halfway mark coming off the lighthouse, and I make a curved arc coming off the lighthouse and another swoop down line, which reminds me a little bit of a slide. Then I just sort of sketch in the end of my wave. I'm going to come here and say that the water is flowing about the lighthouse at this angle and sort of sketch in the splash of the wave on the far side. Drawing is just one skill in art, and if you find this part challenging, please know it is not cheating to trace. And if you'd like to know more about this painting or anything you see here, or even where to get a traceable, you can go to TheArtSherpa.com. I'm going to use a number 10 bright. I like brights because they have a nice crisp edge. I very much enjoy this one because the hairs, or in this case bristles, are quite firm. So this is a really robust brush for me to use. My colors today, in case you're curious, are burnt sienna, phthalo blue, Mars black, dioxazine purple. Sometimes these look a lot alike. Titanium white, and cad yellow medium. I have 2 little spots of what's called acrylic glazing gloss. This is a product that slows down the drying time of my paint and allows me to do glazes. So I like it very, very much. And to maybe help us a little bit as we're painting, you can always make a note if you have trouble seeing the difference between 2 colors that are very close. You can always just add a note so you don't feel confused. And that's really normal. I'm going to get my brush wet, and I'm going to start with my first color mix, which is a little burnt sienna into my phthalo blue. Because these are contrasting colors on the color wheel, which means they live in opposite places on a color wheel, when you mix them together, they have the effect of graying out or neutralizing each other, creating more natural and muted colors, which can be very, very nice. I'm going to add quite a lot of white to that mixture so that it's a very nice light neutral tone. You can see how it is to the tip of the brush, not very far up, and that it's not perfectly mixed. I might even grab a little of that glazy medium to help me when I'm painting on the canvas. I'm going to come in the upper right corner and take this stormy mixture in a little bit. This is going to be a very expressive painting, which means that my brush strokes might be changing directions and be very disorderly. And I like that. That's always sort of fun. Come and get, interestingly enough, a little purple on your brush, and even if you need to, a little black. I'm going to pull some white into that. This gives us some very interesting stormy effects. And I can blend these little edges together. Sometimes people think that you can't blend acrylics, but actually you really can. They blend quite nicely, especially if you're using something like glazing medium, which really helps them out. Alright, now let's be brave and get a small, tiny amount of our black. Because we're using Mars Black, it has a lot of pigment in it. You can see I still haven't rinsed my brush, which must seem very interesting if you haven't painted before. But you'll find that a lot of artists don't rinse their brushes because they enjoy the way that the pigments that they've already loaded on their brushes interact with each other. And it helps create a more surprising and interesting piece, which I really like. I'm trying to really put a lot of energy into this storm with my brush stroke by varying it around. Now I'm going to paint around my lighthouse a little bit. I might grab a little of my phthalo blue, a little of my purple, and some more black. Add a little white to that mixture. And keep helping it with my glazing. This is a very, very, very stormy day. The sky is very expressive. I'm going to paint around my wave that I traced, but not really carefully, because I'm going to be coming back with paint in a very energetic method. I just want to get my storminess into what I've got going. I'm going to get a little brown, some white to it. Have you ever noticed in storms there can be a lot of brown, a lot of colors in the sky? I'm always interested to see what kind of colors a sky might give me and the way the light is bouncing around and all the different things that I can see in it. It's always super interesting to me. I'll take a little of my burnt sienna over to my purple. Still tone it with a bit of black. And I'm going to come down here with this interesting mixture. I think I want it to be darker, so I'm going to add a little more black to that. There, that is quite stormy. And that's what I'm looking for. You'll notice that I'm pushing really hard with my brush into the canvas. You can hear the scratching noises of the bristles. Sometimes you have to press hard into the canvas because there can be coatings or surface treatments beyond the gesso on canvases that can make them not want to take paint. I'm going to just put a smidge of one into this. I want it to be a little lighter, but not much. I'm trying to create something very dark and very stormy. Feel free to use the reference photo or any part of what you see here to help you know what the piece will look like when it's finished. This is a piece to just hear that scrumbling. That's what we call that when we really press the brush in. Pull some more purple out. When I even grabbed a little black, so I went a little purple, a little brown, a little blue, a little black. I went everywhere, and you can see that dark color. And I'm going to add it into this corner to make this corner seem even stormier than it was, which is very enjoyable. I'm going to get some of this black pigment onto my brush, but I still haven't rinsed it. You can see the pigment is working its way up into what's called the ferrule, which is the metal part here. I'm going to just keep adding this stormy sky in. I might get some more white now. So I get up into these clouds, lightening it up. There were so many lighthouses that have such interesting histories. I am doing Mars black and blue now, just at the edge of my brush, as you can see. A little white, and pulling a little of this glazing medium. If you don't have glazing medium, that's okay. I needed a lot more than you might because my studio is very hot. Has a lot of lights in it, so you can see what I'm doing. That can make my paint dry fast. More than the heat, it's the dryness in the air that's actually making it dry very quickly. I feel like adding a little more grayed out color in the upper right corner, so I'm pulling out a little white. You'll notice I'm always working from the edges of my paint plops and pulling it out, drawing it out like this. And what that does is help me preserve my paint by not going into the centers of them. I felt like that was just a little too green, but it's very nice under here. You can even get a little more white into this. See, I pulled that. It's almost like a bead on my brush. I'm going to come here and really add to this stormy feel over here. Just enjoying it. Haven't rinsed my brush yet. Today we're going to call my brush Pigpen, because that's what it's like sometimes when you're painting. You're like working the pigments out and working the pigments in. And a little more black where it's close. I let it get into the white here. You can see how I'm pulling this black. And that can help. And again, I'm just sort of keeping track of where I had that little detail, but I'm not too worried even if I paint it out. I just need to know where things are well enough to put them back in later. I'm going to create kind of a little cloud bank here. I'm still not rinsing my brush. I'm going to pull out some of my white. And you can even see right now how the pigment in my brush is tinting or toning the white. Grab a little glazing medium so I have a nice flow. And I'm going to come here and in very expressive little brush strokes imply that there's a darker bank of clouds below here, and there's some more interesting tonality up here. Acrylic painting is a lot about layers. I'm still pulling things out. And don't let a painting intimidate you. You know, don't let a painting make you feel like, oh, I could just never do that. You know, always give it a go. You never know. I'm just bringing a little unevenness to the clouds here and increasing this stormy feel that I'm looking to see. And I'm going to pull a little more black, a little more brown, maybe even some purple to just enforce this layer of storm. You can see how I'm just scrumbling. You can hear how I'm kind of scrumbling and scraping my brush around. Don't put your finger in the paint like I just did. Don't do that. Don't do that. I'm going to darken this over here. I'm going to get a little of my blue. Get some black. See that nice dark storminess? You may want to get some glaze just to pull that out. very abstract, expressive painting you can do. Don't ever worry about it. Look at this. Just going back and forth. You can see how I'm like almost crisscrossing and being very random. The brush is dry. Pigment is just being scraped across the surface. And yet you now have a very expressive, interesting sky that you've got here. If you want to carry some of your purple and brown story over here, you can always just come with another little, what's called a dry brush. This is where your brush has no water on it and is dry, but it's got a little bit of paint, and you kind of push and convince your canvas that it's going to take a little bit of it. Do what you say, which is really quite a lot of fun. How are you doing? Don't let any of this make you nervous. Let the storms in your life pass by you, be the lighthouse. And in this painting, same thing. We're going to get through this storm together. And I'm going to explain everything I'm doing so you can do this at home. If you want more information about what you see here, you can check the description below. Let's keep painting. So now we have the excitement of the water that we get the pleasure of putting in. I still haven't rinsed off poor brush here. And I am going to just give it just a little bit of moisture because the paint is almost making it stiff. And I'm going to pull out, interestingly enough, some black here. And then I'm going to pull out some brown. Back to the black. Back to the brown. And I'm looking for a wet rock in a storm color. I went almost a minute and I thought I'd get some blue, but then I was like, no, I don't know. So I'm going to paint this very dark shape. Here, you see this lighthouse would have to be built on something. And this rock right here tells you, right, that it is built on something quite sturdy. And you can even include some of this dark color right here at your lighthouse. Now I'm going to create a very deep tone going up this lighthouse. And interestingly enough, with this just like it is, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to get some yellow and pull it into this dark, muddy, strange color. You can go ahead and get some brown if you want it. This is a very limited palette in art. That's what we call this. When we're using few colors, here's a little brown, back over to this yellow. I'm looking for a color that makes me feel like this structure has been in storms like this before. Grabbing some of that glazing medium to help improve the fluidity of my paint. I'm going to paint the whole lighthouse this very weathered, exposed to the elements color. Even though this was probably an off-white, oxidization, storms, minerals, those things would have changed that. And again, I'm enjoying the fact that this brush has very stiff bristles so that I can push my color into the canvas. If when we're really stressed out right now in your life, this act of pushing this paint into the canvas is very, very satisfying. And I like to listen to the way the brush scratches on the surface. And sometimes that's enough to help me let go of whatever has been bothering me. We can't control the weather in life. But sometimes we can find a way to feel better. I'm going to pull out a little more pigment onto my brush from this yummy bit I had mixed. And I'm going to go to the top here and just also make sure that this color is here. There's going to be several layers. The watercolor pencil that I sketched it in with is disappearing nicely. And I'm going to add just a little bit. I'm getting rid of the white. I'm getting rid of the white. I add this right up both rings. So now I've kind of got this in, and that tells me a lot of interesting stuff about this lighthouse. Now I'm going to do something that blows your mind. I'm going to rinse my brush out. Now to mix the next part. This is very interesting. I'm going to pull out a little of my yellow. I'm going to come over and visit my blue. And this makes a very, very interesting deep color. And I'm going to add just a smidge of black to it. So I had gone yellow to my blue. It created a blue-green. And I added a black to it. And that gave me this deep, cold ocean color. And the first thing that I'm going to do is put this deep dark color right here on this wave that's splashing up right here. And I think it could be even darker than what I've got here. I could pull out a little more of my blue, come get a little bit of my yellow, see this color go a bit of a green, and add some black to it. And just be darkening this space. Calm waters in warm locations are aqua blue and very see-through. Cold waters in stormy locations become very dark and deep and mysterious. And so that can help you when you're painting. Be sure and keep that feeling. I'm going to pull out some more blue and a little more black. And work that in. If you need some glazing medium to help the paint, I'm going to get it. Again, keep in mind that sometimes I use things because of the conditions in my studio. But your studio, or wherever you're painting, which might be like a kitchen table, might be in an office, it might be in a garage, anywhere in the world. I don't know what your conditions are like, but that can impact your paint. So that's why I like to explain to you. I'm getting a little black and a little blue and really making a deep, cold color. I might even get a little purple this time. Look how dark and cold that feels. And add a little more here. I'm still keeping that churning feeling to these brush strokes. And I'm going to slow down. I'm going to try to slow down my motion here. You can kind of see how I'm pushing and rolling and moving my brush around to get it. Pushing in and going scrumble, scrumble. I'm just enjoying that. And that's something to get used to doing when you're painting. It's one way to use your brush. It's a little bit hard on it, but I enjoy it. I'm going to pull out a little purple into my blue. Maybe a little black. And I'm going to come under my wave with this very, very dark color along my lighthouse. It's okay that I've gone a little bit over this because I'm going to be painting a lot of detail in my lighthouse. And so right now what I'm doing is putting my values in. Sometimes this is called an underpainting. A lot of people get frustrated when they're painting more complicated pieces or landscapes because underpaintings can look a little bit crazy and ugly. I know, it's a strong word because all paintings are valid and all art is valid, but you gotta love your art through its underpainting stage. I pulled a little more black and blue into that, and now I'm adding this darker shadow to under this wave coming up. I'm pulling a little more black and blue, just adding to it. Now you'll notice these two colors will be different from each other, and that will help me later when I'm trying to say that there's two planes of water. Love your paintings through their difficult growing up stages. When you're getting that first layer of paint on the canvas, it usually takes 2 or 3 layers of paint to really find the picture on the duct. And I'm adding more of this dark pigment here, just allowing it to be deep. I'm going to change this up a little bit. Still not rinsed. You think I'm a mad person, I'm sure, with my crazy not rinsing. But there's a part of you that's curious. How will this all work out? It's going to work out great. It's going to work out great. Show you that again. I grabbed a little black, a little of this blue and black mixture, and came over to my brown. Pulled a little bit out. The brown creates an interesting deep green hue that's got a gray about it, and it will feel quite interesting. I'm going to bring that color right over here since it's still on my brush. No point in wasting some good color. Because again, what am I doing? I'm trying to get the values on my canvas first. I haven't even changed my brush yet. I probably won't use that many brushes in my painting. I'm going to come pull a little purple. My brush is still quite messy. I'm going to let this blue and black that we mixed earlier get kind of on here. Grabbing that glaze gel, I'm going to come over to the side here. It's amazing how in nature, I might even bring some of these colors forward. Grab some more of what I've got mixed there already on that side there. Just back and forth with my brush, letting these two spaces sort of blend together. I think the biggest challenge of this painting is just having faith that if you hang in and you don't give up, that it's going to be okay. That's the biggest challenge in our lives too. To not give up. A little more purple. So I've got the brown kind of coming into this, then I get a little purple. I come over to where I have my blue and black mixed, and I get a little more of my glazing to just sort of help this go up. And it's interesting how the purple still is in the pigment here. I'm now kind of curving my brush strokes to make it feel like there's a rise for the wave. That's important when you're painting waves, is creating that curve that makes the mind feel that there's a rise. Everything in painting. Oh, look, I'm going to just come work the edge here. I've seen everyone do this. Just going fast. Sometimes I get asked if you can paint the edges of your canvas, and of course you can. Of course you can paint the edges. Back to sort of brushing this up and down. Up and down. Up and down. Now I'm going to get a little of my purple out on the edge of my brush. You can kind of see the pigment has kept moving up and up, but what I've currently loaded is right there at the edge. And I'm going to pull a little blue out. And I'm going to deepen and darken some of what I'm seeing underneath here. There's going to be a couple layers of this, but I want to start talking about it now. Art is a conversation that you're having on a canvas that eventually you're going to have with a viewer. And that is always interesting to see what everybody's going to say when they see what you've been up to. I'm going to pull a little more blue out. Maybe come right here. You know, I've got this wave that I'm going to paint over the top, but that's sort of fun. And this is interesting. I'm going to rinse my brush now again. Pressing, pressing, pushing, pushing in. Because I've got to paint some of the tops and I've got to paint some highlights. So the first part I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little of my yellow over to my blue. But it's not perfect here, is it? Because these other colors we've been mixing are here. And that helps me. And now I'm going to get a little white. And on the top of this wave, I'm going to start putting this color down. And I'm going to curve it over like this. And already the crash and fall of what's happening here will start to feel like it's going on. Maybe a little more blue into that. And I keep going. Gotta just keep building up those colors and the layers. Keep weathering the storm. Keep hanging in. Super important when you're painting or living your life. Keep hanging in. I'm going to get a little purple over here, and I haven't rinsed my brush. And I'm going to be crazy and add some brown to it. Here at the edge of what is my wave, I'm going to bring this purple. And I'm going to pull this up into my lighter color. And then just brush that up. It's the first sort of start of what I might be saying there. Still not rinsing because I just can't help myself. I might get a little brown here. I am taking this wave even a little in front of my lighthouse. I'm making sure that I honor the sketch that I put in. It's very important that this edge be sort of interesting and dreamlike and rough, because the wind, now I'm flicking this back right here. This is the wave energy being pushed back by this lighthouse, which has stood a very, very, very long time. And I've got the beginnings of what I would call an underpainting in. When I rate the difficulty of my paintings, I always think about how many layers are involved and how many skills are involved, and emotionally what that's like. But you can kind of see that starting to take shape. I'm going to get a number 4 bright, and I'm going to quick grab some of my brown and add it to my cad yellow medium hue. I'm going to get some of my brown and add that to my cad medium hue. And I'm going to just up here make sure that I put in this first. I'm going to pull this down a little bit past that second line, because we know that's going to be a fence. That's going to see through a little bit. And this is how we create that illusion. These strange, unexpected layers that can happen between two places. Just painting that there. Go ahead and grab some more of this paint. You can even come to the top here and give these little lines some second definitions. I'm pulling a little of the gold in here. And that's looking pretty good. Now, I'm going to, with this very messy brush, it's already got the yellow and brown and gold in it, come pull out some black, add some white to that. You can see me kind of rolling and pulling. I'm going to make sure that this up here is painted in nicely. Just scrumbling that around. Just scrumbling it around. Pull out a little white. And then we're going to just here. Now this is quite, my brush is still very, very messy. Just adding a highlight right here. And you remember we kind of had put one up in this corner. if way distant, that is where maybe our light source is. And so that's always nice. I'll leave this aside for a second. I need a brush between this size and the size I've been using. So I'm going to get a number 8 bright. And I'm going to start adding the highlights and lowlights in my waves. So I'm going to pull out a little purple, grab a little brown, and give that a little tone back with some white. Keep pulling brown into it. And start pulling this up and down to talk about the wall of this wave. See how that's pulling up and down? Pull a little more of this out. Grab more purple if you need it. And we're going to keep just making these curved strokes, creating these walls of wave. Under here, I want to pull out a little of my purple and even a little black because I want it to be quite deep. Come right underneath this. And I'm going to pull a little of the shadow down. Right here. Pulling that down. Interestingly, there's going to be some different things that happen there. This is about creating tones. I switch my brush to its edge and pull that down. And I switch my brush to the edge and pull it down. I'm scrumbling back and forth. You can see the brush starting back and forth, and I'm just adding the paint that way. Now I can pull a lot of white and maybe a titch of black into my brush without rinsing it. Get this interesting, oh, come over and visit that a little bit, gray. We'll make sure that there's a interesting little highlight there as well. Maybe right there. Right here, something is afoot. Bring some of this other color right there. Come around the wave with this purple, but stop at this deeper water. And I like to come back a little bit, down, back, and splash some water up on this rock. So now the storm is starting to find its true voice. Right here, I'm going to take some of my purple and some of my blue, and some purple, and some brown. Back to the purple. Sometimes it can be kind of hard to find a color, and you got to not be stressed out when it is. Just right at the edge here. I'm going to add some of that definition. And then, pulling that, I'm going to add some white into my brush. I'm going to come from this back side of this water here, kind of lining along the edge. You can see I'm taking my brush, dragging it along this little top edge of the wave, and pulling it down. And then I'm going to take some of this and flick it back. See how that wave starts to have shape. And I'm going to grab even a little more white into that. And come right here. Add that extra highlight to the top of that. And that's going. You can add some of this in this curve. Try to keep the strokes curving all together. And I am bringing some of these brush strokes down, sending one up, bringing some of these brush strokes down, sending one up, maybe pulling some down into here. And again, adding this extra dimension in a scrumble. See, I go scrumble, scrumble, pushy, shaking the brush around all around the rock. Not too bad. Now we're going to come to the edge of this. Maybe a little brown. And I'm going to along this and pull this up. Just letting the pigment push out into the paint, giving me some of those turbulent color mixes that you need to have when you're doing painting like this. You know? And I'm going to, even crazily enough, pull a little black into my mixture. So create this sort of dirty gray. And add that next layer. Rinse out a little bit. I know you think I never do it, but I do it. I'm going to get a little of my purple, a little of my brown, back to my purple. Got a deep color going here again. And I just need some places to have this. Right under here, under this wave, I want this dark, deep, churning shadow. Dark, deep, churning shadow. Right? And then right here, I'm going to pull some more of that color that I mixed, which was a little brown and a little purple. And I'm going to just bring this wave up a little bit. Maybe even add some of this shadow right here. And bring this up and down our wave. So I'm going down, scrambling back and forth. Can you see how the brush goes back, forth, and then I go back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, up, down. And that's kind of how sometimes I can keep from cloning or repeating brush directionality sometimes. It's interesting to think about, how do I do things so I can tell somebody else how they might do things. I'm going to rinse out my brush. I'm going to come back with a little of my yellow to this blue area, which is quite dirty. But I want that. It's so crazy. I want that now. And I pulled white into that, and I'm going to brush more of this aqua highlight where the wave has a little bit of light coming through. I'm also going to pick up some more of this color. I'm going to let it go deeper if it wants to. And I'm going to bring it over here and pull some of that up into this wave from this churning, interesting bit of water right here. And you can see I'm doing that thing too. I'm going back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. But I keep it where I feel like it should be. Maybe a little of it going up this wave. It's very dry now, so it's like dry brushing a little of that tone into the wave. But yet, suddenly that gives it some fun shape, doesn't it? And we like that. Pulling a little yellow. Pulling a little blue. There's a nice bit here. I will come and add some of that. All of this. Maybe even a little bit of that here. And a little here. Just something to say what's happening. Here, I want to take this even deeper, and I'm going to probably need to jump up to a bigger brush for a second. I'm going to get my big 10 back out. And I'm going to come and pull my purple to my blue. Add a little black to it. This is almost a Prussian blue. But I didn't want everyone to have to keep buying different paints. I wanted to show you how you could paint something with a very, very limited color palette. So I'm scrumbling, kind of see it pushing in and going back and forth. this over the previous level of paint. It's okay that some of it is showing through and that some of it is lighter. You want that. I might even pull a little more black in. Really load that on my brush. Get a little white. Right here in the center, create kind of a deep, there's not a lot of light on it, but it's reflective because the way it's water. It's just focused really right here. I'm going to wipe off my brush, interestingly enough, but not rinse it. I'm going to pull in some brown, work it through the pigment on my bristles, add a little white, come up on the upside of this rock, and that highlight. I'm going to wipe my brush. I like to do that, wipe my brush on the towel, pull out a little black, and add this deep shadow. You are doing fantastic. If you are hanging in, you are doing amazing. And if you're just sitting there contemplating doing this, you're still doing amazing. Because you're being optimistic and hopeful. And painting rewards that. It's also pretty fond of determination and perseverance. I'm going to need to put this back in water. Pull my number 8 out for a second. And I'm going to get some really deep black right here. Just right around what seems to be my water. Add that dark shadow. Working out pretty darn good. If you like this episode and you want to see more art content like this, be sure and hit the subscribe button. Also, it's about the only way to get notifications when we're having a live event. So if you want to come to a live event and join our amazing live community and talk art and paint mixtures and all of those things and just basically goof around, that would be your best way of doing it. Let's keep painting. I'm going to take a little of my yellow into my kind of messy black over here. It just warms the darkness and the intensity of the Mars black a little bit. So I'll add a little white. This will be, you can see I'm just still pulling out the black. Maybe some deep shadow right here. I'm going to go along here and create that. And up this a bit. Just doing the back and forth like I showed you. Pushing the paint around. You get to push the paint around today. That's what you get to do. Just pushing it around. And trying to give it that weathered, rough feel. Make sure there's no like clean, hard edges. Pull out a little more of this black. You can also add some brown. I just did that right there to sort of change up the tone. And I'm going to, just underneath the lip that I know that I have, pull a shadow. I'm using just the corner of my brush. But if you have trouble with your brush, if your brush is giving you thicker lines than you want, or frustrating you, you can always switch to a smaller brush. So just don't let any of that bug you. I'm pulling a small amount of shadow here across what would be the walkway, and a little bit underneath here. Now I'm going to get some more white paint. Haven't rinsed my brush. I think you've kind of figured out that trend. And I'm going to add the weathering highlight. My pressure is very light now. You can kind of see how the canvas is bouncing. Pressure is very light. I'm not pushing it in when I'm scrumbling. I'm pushing it in and the canvas will stay tight. But when my pressure is light, it will bounce a little bit. Look for that bounce. I'm trying to come in to find that edge a little more. Just a highlight on this side. Just a highlight. And Just a nice little highlight. See how it's weathering? I might weather it lightly here. And I'm just lightly brushing it on and letting it be around. If you over lighten or over darken, if you over highlight or over darken, you can always come back with the opposite of what you had and do what's called knocking it back, which is just muting it in some way. So if I wanted to push some stuff back, I could get a little more of my black on there and come back up. See how easy that is? Just pushing this in to the Lighthouse, weathering it. So keeping these brush strokes scrumbly. And now you can see I'm just pushing in and the canvas is just really feeling it versus when I'm just lightly tapping. Just pushing it in. I grabbed some gel there just to help my paint in the dryness and heat of my studio. But you might be in a beautiful location, in perfect climate, and not be having any of those experiences. Now, interesting thing you can do right now is grab a little black and a little blue. And you can even come here in this lower corner and increase the shadow a little bit and spread that lightly around. Makes it feel more like it's there. I'm going to come right here. A little bit of this because it's quite dry. There we go. Come down. There we go. We got this. We're getting through this. Just push this up to the wave. Keep scrumbling around. Fun stuff to do. I'm going to get that number 4 bright again. But I'm still working on this part of the job. So I'm grabbing my black. I'm getting my blue. I'm finding that nice kind of Prussian. Getting a little white into all of this. Making a little bit of highlight here. This is close to the light, so there'll be parts of it that are quite well lit. And so you've got to make sure that you're showing that. Right? Pulling a little more white. Got my number 4 bright. I'm just helping define my shape. Everything on a painting is defined with light and dark. Whether it's abstract or figurative like this. When they say figurative, they mean, you know, in the human figure, we're making things look like they are. These are just words to talk about things. They're not words that are trying to make you feel bad. They're just words trying to express what we're looking at. Got that there. Now I'm going to do an interesting thing. I've got my brush quite dirty. As you can see, I'm pressing down, pressing down, pressing down. I'm going to grab a little of my yellow, with it being as dirty as it is. And I'm going to come right here and just pull down a little bit. And then, between these two waves, I'm going to pull down a little bit. So there's some windows looking out. They're small windows because they have to withstand storms. Come back into your black. I'm letting the yellow still be on my brush. I'm going to darken some of that. Same here. Just darken some of these spots. I'm darkening some of it right here with this number 4 bright. Quite small. I think that's looking pretty good. I'm kind of excited. Now we get to do some of the interesting bits. So I'm going to wipe off my brush, but predictively, I'm not going to rinse it. And I might grab just a little purple, even though it had a lot of yellow. Yellow and purple are contrasts. And they will often gray each other out. And I'm going to pull some white into my brush. And come along this wave here with my number 4. and this white. I'm going to just paint in little dash of brush strokes of frothy water. So I'm going kind of froth like this, maybe take some of it up and go a different direction here. And it can help if you look at storms and look at the way the waves crash. If you can safely observe them where you're at, that's always good. Grab some black into this. I don't want it to be bright white because I want it to feel like it's very stormy. Start pulling some of this sea foam on the wave. Got some more white. I haven't rinsed my brush. And just, there's a little splash going up. And I'm going to take this up and down. Like that. Just enjoying that. Gonna flick some up here. Because there would be, wouldn't there? Wouldn't it be quite energetic right here where this wave is touching the solid object? Be quite energetic. So I'm pushing and letting it flick out. It's a very interesting thing to try. It's a challenging little lighthouse as it is. Blowing a little paint. Pushing, see, sometimes when I press in and go like that, it creates an interesting, like, very splashy effect. So you kind of start to learn that your brushes, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to make sure that I'm pulling a little color into this. Because I really, really don't want it to be bright white. I'm going to make some of this, wipe it off if you need to. Foam coming up this wave. And then, right here at the corner with my not perfectly clean brush, do some splashing right here, where it would be, wouldn't it? Be right there, wouldn't it? Just being energetic. And along this top of this wave, where its energy is expended at the edge, a little purple on here. Purple, little black, little purple, little white. Just trying to keep it from being a bright, bright white. But it needs to feel like it is, like somewhat just on the edge here. I'm just pulling this, churning water out. So I'm pushing around, being very lyrical. What I'm doing. Around the rock would have some very energetic water, wouldn't it? It would be quite frothy and exposed all around that. Just letting it be very intense. Going to push some of this around the lighthouse where the wave is. So the wave is coming. It's going to swallow it in a minute. Grab a little yellow, a blue, have that pushed on my brush, but yet still just grabbing the white, just trying to get these tones of this foam to make more sense. One fun bit here I'm going to do, right? I'm going to come here on the left hand side and I'm going to apply a small splash of water that is just starting to peek around. Maybe even another one here. Just starting to peek around. I think that's one of the things I like about this so much is the tendrils of this incredibly powerful wave that have just started to delicately, expressively engulf this amazing Lighthouse. And so you want to start pushing those. Pushing those. This, push, push, push it, push it. Pushing it. And then coming along this little edge. Right? Where the energy of this wave, if you just watch video waves, watch where they're, how at their edges they start to come apart. And when you start to paint that in, then you start to get what is a tremendous storm. You come along the edge here, and the paint is thick. See, I grab the paint. It's like on a bead on the edge. I'm just like, even along the top of this, maybe. You know, if you want to come back and increase the froth, maybe like right here between these two spaces where there's rocks and things fighting back. And since you used, I'm doing these little lyrical edges here, and since you used an off-white, you can come back with something that's quite light to create that space on these edges. And they can feel quite frothy. And maybe even here. Pull that out. It's fun to do. It is fun to do. And maybe you're feeling better about the actual storms that are happening in your life, the circumstances that are beyond your control. I'm doing a thing where I'm wiping the brush off because, see, it's very loaded with paint. I may even come and wipe it off on my towel. If it gets too much paint on it, it can be hard to control. Putting these little highlights here. And they're fun. And they are really fun. Can add some of them coming up right here. Just sort of little dashes. The energy of that wave crashing. That's there for you. Come up here and some of this foam up, coming up the wave. Because it would. It would be coming up the wave. Scrambling up and down. Hopefully you're starting to feel this storm. Now I'm going to come up here. I'm going to take a little of my black and a little of my blue and pulling it out. Grab some white. It's too blue, so I'm going to get more in the black. I want it quite gray. And I'm going to sort of define this upper bell. I'm pulling it across, but I'm letting it be quite a dry brush. Might even come this way. A little top here. And then across. Just defining that out a little bit. Weather it. Just sort of scrumbling it to weather it. Oh, my pressure is super light. I don't want a lot of pigment coming down on this. I want it to be just very, very light pigment. Now I'm going to finish the lighthouse part. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out my yellow and get a little of my white. I'm going to just put a little of this in here. But I'm going to leave those two tones. Now it's super important. I might come along the top of this with this, and you can come along the bottom too if you want to highlight that. I'm going to wipe off my brush and get some white on there, but there's still yellow pigment. I'm going to add the second color to what is happening up on my light bell. I'm going to wipe it off, get a very, 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 very dry brush, and I'm going to pull out radiating out from this lighthouse into this storm with a dry, dry brush. Like a fan. It's going to open up like a fan. The light. It's trying to warn people where the rocks are. It's trying to help people survive this. And straight first, and then just keep pulling that fan. You can see I'm not painting solid lines. They're very dry, and just some of the pigment is showing on there. And it doesn't take a lot, and you don't want a lot. Alright, and still with my brush quite dirty, we'll come here. I'm going to the little walkway. Just pressing these in. Just barely showing, because they would barely be showing with the light. Help define that. Some definition, some painterly space. Just coming along here to create a little shadow, and if it gets away from you, you can wipe your brush. I'm going to just get a little white, come here, and push it back. On acrylic paint, as long as things are dry, you're good. And I feel like we did an amazing job. We can come and fix our windows a little bit if you want to define those a little bit more. And, you know, I'm adding a little white here to give the light a quality of two tones. Well, that was fantastic. I don't know if you believed you were going to get through it. I hope you're really surprised at what you were capable of doing. I think in life we're capable of much more. We're capable of weathering storms. We're capable of surviving things. We're just much more extraordinary on the inside than we have any idea about. I really appreciate your time today. I hope you're going to keep painting and be creative in your lives. Be kind to yourselves, be kind to other people, and I want to see you at the easel really soon. Bye-bye.